The invisible architects of your destruction. 10 Stoic lessons that rewire the way you experience disrespect forever. Listen closely. I am about to show you the most dangerous video you will encounter this year. Dangerous not because of what it teaches, dangerous because of what it cannot help but undo. You will walk into a room tomorrow morning and you will see it differently. You will sit across from someone at dinner and the small ritual of small talk will look different. You will catch yourself in the mirror and notice, for a moment, that you were never the person you thought you were, that a stage manager you never met has been quietly adjusting the lighting on your face for years, and that the show you have been performing was never your show at all. This is not entertainment. This is the dismantling and rebuilding, from the foundations up, of the most expensive mistaken assumption the modern person has ever installed in their own operating system, that the way other people treat you is, in some meaningful sense, about you. Most of what passes for handling disrespect is nothing more than a rehearsed flinch, a scripted reaction, taught to you by people who never escape their own emotional chains, designed less to end the moment than to perform the moment, to signal to a watching room that you are still in command when you are not, to put on the costume of composure when the body underneath the costume is quietly surrendering in every cell. Today, we are going to dismantle the entire architecture of human psychological warfare, lesson by lesson. We are going to use the most brutally effective body of operational wisdom ever recorded in human history. We are going back 2,000 years to battlefields drowned in mud and blood, to slave quarters where men learned to master their minds while their bodies were in actual chains, to the private journals of emperors who commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers and still found time, late at night by lamplight, to fight the hardest battles inside themselves. Those men Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, Cato the Younger faced the same exact thing you face every single day of your adult life. Human cruelty. Social manipulation, public humiliation, the private, quiet betrayal of someone you had stopped worrying about. And they discovered something the modern world, with all of its machinery and all of its funding and all of its confident prescriptions, has still not fully understood. Not a comeback, not a clever line, not a temporary strategy to win the next argument. They engineered a complete, irreversible, permanent psychological transformation, a state in which insults cannot find purchase, in which manipulation simply fails, in which the chaos of other people is no longer able to enter your mind without an invitation you explicitly chose to issue first. This video is 10 lessons. Each one is a scalpel. The first cuts deep. The last cuts deeper than you thought a piece of writing was allowed to. If you leave before the end, you will keep the wound and miss the cure. So make the decision now. Commit fully or close this and return to sleeping inside someone else's emotional weather report. The choice is yours. Choose quickly. The people trying to dismantle your peace are already 3 moves ahead. Let's begin. Lesson 1: The fever was never about you. Before we talk about what to do when someone disrespects you, we need to talk about what is actually happening. Because right now, in the wiring that runs your life, you have this backwards. And this backwards understanding is the single largest ongoing tax on your peace of mind that you are paying without realizing you are paying it. Imagine being summoned to the bedside of an old friend who is, as far as anyone can tell, dying. He is shaking. He is incoherent. He has lost the ability to hold a sentence together. He is staring at you as though you were the reason the room is on fire, because his fever has brought something to the surface that no longer has anything to do with you at all. A good doctor does not take the fever personally. The doctor understands the fever for what it is: a signal, a symptom. The body telling the doctor that something somewhere inside has gone clinically wrong. The fever is not a verdict about the doctor. The fever is a confession about the patient. Marcus Aurelius, the morning after he took the throne of the most powerful empire the world had ever seen, ruling 70 million people from Scotland to Mesopotamia in what was then the entire known civilized world, opened his private journal and wrote a sentence that took more courage to commit to the page than most people will ever manage in any context. Begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet today with the meddler, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest, the jealous, the unsociable. He was the emperor. He had every practical, material, legal reason to believe that the people around him should treat him with respect. And he still woke up every morning assuming the worst, because he had already done the deeper work of understanding that the worst was coming from the people around him, not at the people around him. The difference between Marcus and every other emperor Rome ever produced was not that he avoided disrespect. The difference was that he understood its true origin. Disrespect is never a verdict. It is a symptom. When a colleague cuts you off mid-sentence in front of the entire team. When a partner makes that specific, ancient, tired joke about you at the dinner table you keep attending despite the joke. When a stranger online says something with the precise architecture of cruelty. When your own brother, the one you have not been able to impress in 20 years of trying, looks at the thing you have spent 3 weeks building and says, with the casual devastation only family can achieve, that's nice. None of that is a measured assessment of your worth. All of it is the visible surface of an invisible war inside a person whose internal condition you have never once been invited to inspect. Epictetus knew this in a way that would shatter most modern minds. Epictetus was not born into philosophy. He was born into slavery. He was owned by a man named Epictetus, a notoriously cruel master who, according to several surviving ancient accounts, once twisted Epictetus's leg deliberately, with amusement, until the bone snapped. And as the bone broke, Epictetus looked at his master with the kind of gaze that most people would never be able to maintain under a fraction of that provocation, and said simply, I told you it would break. No rage, no pleading, no humiliation, no performance of pain. Why? Because Epictetus had understood, at the deepest possible level and through the most expensive curriculum a human being could possibly be enrolled in, that his master's cruelty was not a statement about Epictetus's worth. It was a confession of poverty, of character, of humanity, of every resource the master's interior life had never been able to accumulate. You have spent 3 weeks on a presentation. You walk into the boardroom. Within 90 seconds, the colleague who smiles at you in the hallway cuts you off, mocks the data, makes a joke about you in front of the entire team. Your face burns, your chest tightens, every cell in your body is shouting at you to defend yourself. Here is what you do not know about that colleague, and what his behavior is actually telling you. That colleague went home 2 nights ago to an apartment that has been empty for 6 months. Their partner left. They have not slept well in weeks. Their mother called yesterday and they did not pick up. They walked into that boardroom carrying the invisible weight of a life that is collapsing, slowly and irreparably, and your confidence and your preparation and your competence was a mirror that showed them in 3 seconds everything they were not. Their insult was not an attack. It was a desperate, inarticulate scream from a drowning person who needed to pull someone else underwater just to feel for 1 second like they were still breathing. This is not an excuse for toxic behavior. Toxic behavior is still toxic. But you do not have to agree that an insult is about you to be free of its poison. In fact, the two are unrelated. When you genuinely internalize that another person's disrespect is their confession and not your sentence, something quietly remarkable happens inside the machinery you have been using to process the world. The insult loses its poison mid-flight. It arrives and you are simply unmoved. Not because you have spent a decade teaching yourself not to feel anything. Because you have understood what is actually happening in the room, and what is happening in the room has nothing structurally to do with you. That understanding is the first wall of your inner citadel. Build it now, and never let it fall. Lesson 2, expectation, is the raw material disrespect is manufactured from. There is a specific kind of suffering that almost nobody talks about. It is not the suffering of being hurt. It is the suffering of being surprised by being hurt. And until you eliminate that surprise, you will continue to be vulnerable in ways that no quote, no technique, no philosophy can repair from the outside. Epictetus taught, in his manual, what would later become known across 2,000 years as the dichotomy of control. Most people who quote the phrase today, and the phrase has been quoted, badly by people who do not understand what it demands, have never once sat with what the dichotomy is asking. It does not demand optimism. It does not demand trust. It demands zero illusion. In ancient Athens, on a street corner you could still walk down today if you knew where to look. There lived a philosopher named Diogenes. They called him the dog, and not as a compliment. He owned nothing. He slept in a ceramic jar in the public marketplace. He performed the most private human acts in public, specifically to shock people whose sense of dignity he had concluded was not actually dignity but performance. And yet Alexander, the great conqueror of the known world, commander of the largest army of the age, the single most materially powerful human being alive on the planet, at the moment he was standing in front of this man, made a special journey, personally, to meet Diogenes. He stood before the philosopher, in front of witnesses who would retell the story for the next 2,500 years, and said the words that no one in that era would have been able to say without their head eventually separating from their shoulders. Ask of me anything you desire. I will give it to you. Diogenes looked up at the most powerful military commander in human history. He considered the offer for exactly as long as the offer required. Then he delivered an answer that has been quietly embarrassing emperors and billionaires ever since. Yes. Please, move. You are blocking my sunlight. Why did Alexander leave that meeting reportedly saying, if I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes? Because Diogenes had achieved something Alexander, with all his armies and all his gold, could not have purchased with any combination of either. Complete immunity to the opinion of other men. Expectation is the raw material from which all disrespect quietly manufactures its destructive power. Every time you walk into a room expecting to be treated with respect, you have handed that room a weapon. Because the moment that expectation is violated, the violation does not arrive merely as rude behavior. It arrives as a rupture of reality. Your reality. The reality you patiently constructed in your own head and then, without realizing it, handed over to someone else to maintain. The Stoic solution is not to lower your standards. Standards are not the problem. The Stoic solution is to remove your dependence on other people meeting them. You can require excellent behavior from the people in your life. You can demand it. You can enforce it through boundaries and through actual real-world consequences. But you cannot, on pain of becoming someone who cannot move through a single Tuesday without being emotionally evicted. Attach your internal peace to whether anyone delivers it. You are sitting with people you have known your entire life. You make a comment. Your relative, the one who has been performing this exact same sequence at the dinner table since before you had the vocabulary to name what was happening to you, mocks you, belittles the accomplishment, compares you unfavorably by name to a cousin who is not even in the room. The reason it ruins your evening every single time, despite the fact that you have lived through the exact same sequence hundreds of times, the reason it ruins your evening every single time is because every single time you walked into the kitchen carrying hope. Hope that this time would be different. Hope that this time they would see you. Hope that this time they would be proud or impressed, or at the very least capable of letting one of your actual accomplishments exist in the room without smacking it down to make themselves feel taller. That hope is not, as the poetry of self-help would have you believe, beautiful. That hope is the wound. Every single time, the Stoic does not walk into that dinner table with hope. The Stoic walks in with clarity, clear eyes, clear expectations. They have already, privately and quietly, accepted the full range of what might happen from the kindest possible version to the most reliably rehearsed cruelty they have experienced from this person across the entire history of their shared life. And because they have accepted the entire range in advance, in their own mind, sitting alone at home before they got in the car, nothing that any dinner companion can possibly do at the table can break them. This is not pessimism. This is the highest form of psychological preparation available to a human being. The Spartan warriors before battle, according to the surviving accounts, did not sit in their tents visualizing victory. They sat in their tents deliberately meditating on every possible form of loss, every wound, every defeat, every death that the morning might bring, so that when battle actually arrived, nothing could shock them. Nothing could paralyze them. They had already, that morning, made peace with the worst the day had in them. Practice this tonight, before any interaction that carries the potential for disrespect, and almost every interaction in your actual life carries that potential, however much you wish it did not. In your mind, very quietly, accept the worst possible version of that interaction. Not so that you can be crushed by it, so that you can be immunized from it. That is the architecture of zero expectation, and it is one of the most powerful structures a human mind can build. And here is the ugly truth about every loud weapon. It announces the wound it was forged from. Every word you speak in anger is a piece of evidence the other person, and the room watching, is now holding in their hand. Every defense is a map of your vulnerabilities, drawn by you, handed to the person attacking you. Every retaliation confirms, beyond all doubt, that the weapon they wielded found the exact spot they were aiming for. The most lethal weapon in the entire recorded history of human psychological combat makes no sound at all. Cato the Younger, Marcus Porcius Cato, the name that the surviving Roman sources all treat with a kind of reverent caution, was, by every available political measure, the most feared man in the Roman Senate for almost 2 decades. Not because of his military record, not because of his wealth, not because of his network, because of a single discipline that made him virtually untouchable in political combat. He almost never responded immediately. When Julius Caesar, the most brilliant political mind of the ancient world, the man who had reduced entire armies, entire institutions, entire rivals to historical footnotes with nothing but his own mind and his own timing, attempted to publicly humiliate Cato on the floor of the Senate. By design and in front of every senator Rome contained at that hour, Cato looked at him, said nothing, and then, when the entire chamber was leaning forward, waiting for the explosion that the room had been carefully arranged to expect, he calmly returned to the matter at hand. Caesar, who had broken careers the way other people open doors, did not know what to do with silence. Because no one ever does. Silence is not the absence of a response. Silence is the response, and it is the only response that cannot, by the geometry of the moment, be turned into ammunition for the other side. When you speak in anger, you give the other person your words to dissect, to distort, to screenshot, to repeat, slightly altered, to a third party that will now weaponize the version they heard against a fourth. When you explain yourself in desperation, you hand them a map of your vulnerabilities drawn by you, in real time in front of witnesses. When you lash back, you confirm loud enough for an entire room to hear that their weapon found its precise target. And the room now knows, forever, exactly where you can be hurt. But when you are silent, genuinely, serenely, in a way that has been arrived at through actual discipline and not through the trembling of someone who has just frozen you, give them nothing. And nothing, in this one specific context, is everything. Imagine you are at a social event. Someone makes a cutting remark about you in front of a group. Everyone turns to watch your reaction. The disrespectful person is already smiling, because they know the next few seconds belong, by the unspoken agreement of the room, to them. In that moment, most people make one of 2 errors that compounds the damage. They erupt. They say something cutting back, and the room now spends the rest of the evening talking about the fight rather than about the original remark. Or they laugh it off nervously. They collapse inward. They say, haha, yeah, you're right, and spend the next 3 days replaying the moment, wishing they had said something different, inventing, in the small hours of those 3 days, the version of themselves who would have handled it more cleanly, and who does not, in fact, exist. The third path, the Stoic path, is one neither of them saw coming. You hold their gaze for exactly 2 seconds longer than is comfortable. Not glaring, not smiling, just looking. With the calm, clinical detachment of someone observing something mildly interesting in a controlled environment. And then you continue with whatever you were doing before they spoke. No reaction. No acknowledgement. No fuel. The room watches. Something shifts. Because in that silence it becomes clear, to everyone present, including the person who threw the remark, that the lever they tried to pull is not connected to anything. Cato said, I begin to speak only when I am certain what I will say is not worse than my silence. Measure every future response against that standard. Most of what we say in moments of conflict does not clear the bar. And when it does not, close your mouth. Let the silence work. The room will always fill the vacuum. And the disrespectful person will always fill it worse than you ever could. Lesson 4, 11 words that end every attack. We have been building to this. Everything in the previous 3 lessons understanding the origin of disrespect, eliminating the expectation that manufactures its power, mastering the silence that erases the ammunition the attacker might use has been preparation for this single weapon. One sentence. Tested across 2,000 years of documented human conflict, forged in the most unforgiving context a human mind can be forged in. Are you ready? Because this changes how you move through every room you will ever walk into again. In Marcus Aurelius's private journal, The Meditations, he wrote something most scholars gloss over because it sounds, on first reading, like a sentimental aside. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. That last phrase is the entire key. A nature related to my own. Marcus Emperor, philosopher, general, the man who commanded the resources of an entire civilization looked at the senators who had lied to him, the generals who had betrayed him, the rivals who had been quietly arranging his destruction for decades, and said, with the calm of a man who had done the deepest possible interior work, you are made of the same material I am. You are experiencing the same fundamental human condition I am. The difference between us is not what we are. It is what we have chosen to do with what we are. From this position, seeing the shared humanity of even the most toxic person in the room, refusing to deny it even when denying it, would have been easier and more flattering to the story you have been telling about yourself. A question emerges that is not confrontational. It is not retaliatory. It is, in its quietness, the most devastating thing you can say to anyone trying to engineer your emotional collapse. When someone disrespects you after the pause, after the silence, after you have decided internally that you are not interested in escalating, you look at them with calm, level eyes, and you ask, very quietly, are you hoping for a reaction from me? Let me break down precisely why this question is psychologically annihilating for any human being attempting to manipulate another human being. First, it is a mirror. In one sentence, you have dragged their unconscious tactic into full, blinding light. The manipulator operates in subtext. They rely on plausible deniability. I was just joking. You're too sensitive. Don't take everything so personally. Your question removes the subtext entirely. You have named the game. Loud enough to be heard by every witness in the room. Quiet enough to deny that you have raised your voice at all. Second, it is unemotional. You did not snap. You did not plead. You did not defend. You asked a question with the calm of someone who is genuinely, clinically curious. This is catastrophic for the aggressor, because their entire strategy depended on triggering an emotion they could then exploit. You gave them none. Third, it is unanswerable without self-destruction. If they say yes, if they admit they were hoping for a reaction, they have admitted, in front of witnesses, to deliberate manipulation. If they say no, you have still publicly demonstrated with the simple structure of the question that you saw through them. Either path leads to the same outcome: their exposure and your elevation. Your manager makes a belittling comment about your work in front of the team. Everyone in the room holds their breath. You put your pen down. You look at your manager with the quiet, focused attention of someone who is about to say something very precise. Are you hoping for a reaction from me? Dead silence. Your manager blinks, stammers, says something like, "No, it was just feedback." Understood, you say, and you return to your notes. In 11 words, you have shifted every power dynamic in that room, not through aggression, through absolute, unshakable, unmovable clarity. Practice this sentence until it is in your muscle memory. Until the moment disrespect arrives, your body knows the response before your mind has to reach for it. This is not a manipulation. This is not a trick. This is a Stoic mirror returning reality to the person who tried to distort it. Lesson 5: anger is the most expensive luxury you have ever been tricked into buying. You have been lied to about anger your entire life. You were told it is strength. You were shown it as power. Movies celebrate the man who flips the table. Songs worship the woman who burns it all down. The news trains you, every single day, to confuse the visible display of rage with the actual exercise of authority. But the Stoics, who had more direct, prolonged, sustained, daily experience with the actual mechanics of power than anyone who has ever made a Hollywood film, called anger something else entirely. They called it a brief madness. Seneca the Younger was the advisor to Emperor Nero. Nero was, by every available historical account, arguably the most dangerous, most unstable, and most casually violent ruler Rome ever produced. To work for Nero was to understand in your body every single morning with the particular alertness of a man who had not been told he would not be executed by sunset, that a single unguarded expression could mean your death. Seneca lived the entire professional portion of his adult life in a room with a man who could kill him in the time it takes to change his mind. And from that sustained, daily, real-world experience, not from a comfortable study, not from a self-help audiobook, not from a weekend retreat, Seneca wrote the most comprehensive analysis of anger ever produced in any language. A treatise called De Ira, on anger. His conclusion: after decades of observing what anger actually does to the people who experience it, anger is most harmful to itself, not to the target, to the person experiencing it. Every moment you spend in anger about someone else's behavior is a moment you have handed them, for free, the management of your own mind. Think about what anger actually costs. Physiologically, cortisol floods your system. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, the part that gives you access to your own intelligence, goes partially offline. Your vision narrows. Your memory becomes selective. You lose access to your own intelligence at the exact moment you most need it. Psychologically, you replay the incident. You rehearse comebacks in the shower. You narrate the injustice to friends who did not ask for the performance. You carry the other person in your mind like a tenant who pays no rent and quietly destroys the furniture. Seneca asked the question that should be carved above the doorway of every room where anger lives: what is more shameful than a wise man, depending on the moods of fools? When you are angry at someone who has disrespected you, you are not punishing them. You are imprisoning yourself in the wound they inflicted and paying for the cell yourself. Someone you trusted, a colleague, a friend, a partner, says something about you behind your back. It reaches you through a third party. It is cruel. It is untrue. And it has been said to people whose opinion you actually value, in a context where you are not in the room to defend yourself. The rage is immediate. volcanic. Here is what Seneca would say to you in this moment. You are about to make a second mistake that will be measurably worse than the first one. Their betrayal was the wound. Their insecurity, their smallness, their inability to tolerate the specific light you are carrying that is their confession, made verb. But your rage, if you let it govern your response, will compound their small attack into a prolonged campaign that damages you far more than it damages them. The Stoic response is clinical, not cold. Clinical. You observe the betrayal the way a surgeon observes a scan. There is the damage. Here is what it affects. This is the appropriate response. Not with fire. With precision. The next time you feel the heat of anger rising in response to disrespect, and you will, certainly this week, probably today, possibly before you finish reading this lesson, do not suppress it. Suppression is a different kind of damage, and one I will not recommend. Acknowledge it. Name it. I am feeling anger. This anger is information, not instruction. The anger tells you that something important was violated. That is genuinely useful data. But the anger does not get to dictate how you respond. That choice belongs entirely to you. Take it back. Every single time. Lesson 6, build the iron garden that no human being can reach. We need to talk about the actual reason insults hurt. Not the surface reason you have been telling yourself in order to avoid looking at the real one. Until you address the real one, no sentence, no technique, no philosophy will give you lasting immunity. You will keep healing and rewounding in the same cycle, deeper each time, until the architecture collapses. In ancient China, philosophers used an image that captures the trap cleanly. They called it the uncarved block, the P. Wood in its natural, untouched state contained infinite potential. The moment you carved it into a shape, you defined it. You limited it. And more dangerously, you made it dependent on whether other people approved of the carved shape you had decided you needed. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again across 12 books of private journals to the same single question. Who am I when no one is watching? When there is no audience? No applause, no criticism, no one listening at all. What remains? His answer was this: your worth is not carved by the opinions of other men. It is carved by the choices you make in private, the discipline you maintain in silence. The integrity you hold when holding it costs you something that you were not planning to pay that day. An insult can only wound you in a place you have not yet fortified. When someone calls you incompetent, and you lie awake at night tormented by it, they did not create that wound. They found a wound that was already there, a doubt you privately held about yourself, a fear you had not yet examined, an empty space in yourself, knowledge that their words rushed in to occupy, the way water rushes into a hole in a boat. This is not, I should be clear, a criticism of you. This is one of the most useful gifts of information you will ever receive. Every insult that keeps you awake at night is a map. It is showing you exactly where your inner citadel still has exposed walls, exactly where the stones need to be laid before the next storm lands. You create something, a business, a piece of art, an idea, and you put it into the world. And someone with a platform tears it apart publicly, with contempt. And people engage with the contempt. They like it. They share it. Most creators collapse. They delete the work. They retreat from the next attempt. They spiral into a self-doubt that can last for years, sometimes permanently. But the Stoic creator does something structurally different. They ask, calmly, before deciding how to feel about the attack, is what they said actually true? If the answer is yes, this is the most valuable free feedback you will ever receive in your life. It is painful. It is data. Use it. If the answer is no, then the criticism is not about your work. It is about the critic. and the critic's internal condition is not your creative problem to solve. In both cases, you continue. Because your reason for creating was never their approval. If it was, you were already building on sand, and the tide was always coming. Here is the practice. Tonight, take 10 minutes. Write down 3 things you did today that you are genuinely, privately proud of that no one saw, no one praised, no one validated. 3 moments where you chose to act with integrity, discipline, or courage when it would have been easier and far less expensive in the short term not to. Do this every night for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you will have built something that no human insult can reach, because it was built in the private dark, where no one else's opinion was allowed to touch the foundation. The foundation is yours. That is the iron garden. Plant it, water it, and watch what happens when someone tries to pull a weed. Lesson 7. Fight at your highest in the exact middle of the attack. Everything we have built so far has been internal. Mental architecture. Philosophical immunity. The ability, in a quiet moment, to not be broken. But there is a next level, considerably harder to reach, that most people never even approach. The ability to perform at your absolute best in the precise middle of being attacked. In the Roman Colosseum, the greatest gladiators were not distinguished by their strength alone. They were distinguished by their ability to fight with complete technical precision in the moment when the crowd was screaming for their death. In the moment, their opponent was pressing the attack. In the moment, the sand was already soaked with their own blood. The Stoics had a name for this state of total detached focus: apatheia. This word has been catastrophically mistranslated into English for 2 centuries as apathy. Apatheia does not mean not caring. Apatheia means freedom from being controlled by your passions in any given moment, including your fear, your anger, and your desperation. It means you can be fully in the fight, fully engaged with what actually matters, while being completely uncaptured by the emotional chaos happening around you. The most elite version of any human performance happens in the precise space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived 4 Nazi concentration camps and somehow emerged after the war, still capable of writing with precision about how the human mind works, described the same mechanism from a completely different doorway. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. When someone disrespects you in a high-stakes moment, a negotiation, a public presentation, a critical conversation with someone who holds power over your actual life, they are attempting, in real time, to shrink that space to 0. They want stimulus to become response instantly. They want reaction to replace reflection. They want the version of you that has been trained by years of external emotional triggers to take over the version of you that has been trained by deliberate interior work. Your discipline, the discipline forged through everything we have discussed so far, lessons 1 through 6, is what preserves that space. And inside that space, you do not just survive the attack. You use it. You are in a high-stakes business negotiation. The other party is experienced and has decided before walking into the room that the most efficient strategy is to undermine your confidence before the actual discussion begins. They arrive a few minutes late, without apology. They make a cutting remark about your company, designed to soften the floor under your feet. They question publicly, with theatrical concern, whether you have the authority to be in the room at all. Every instinct in you is shouting, defend yourself, prove yourself, explain yourself, do something before they keep talking. The Stoic gladiator does the opposite. They slow down, they breathe, they let the ambush land, and they observe it with clinical detachment that from the outside looks almost casual. Interesting. They are attempting to destabilize me before the actual discussion begins. This tells me something useful. They are more concerned about the outcome than they are appearing. That is information. That is power. And then, from the perfectly preserved space between stimulus and response, they make their opening move. not reactive. Strategic, not emotional. Precise. The attacker expected to find a person off balance. They found someone standing on bedrock. Train this space the way elite athletes train their bodies. Deliberately, systematically, every day you will encounter small moments where someone tries to shrink your response time, a curtailed reply, a dismissive comment, a passive-aggressive text. Practice expanding the space in these small moments. Take the 3 seconds. Breathe, observe, choose. Because when the high-stakes moment comes, and your space will be wide enough to build an entire strategy inside it. In front of them, while they watch Lesson 8, the quiet withdrawal of light that changes everything. So far, we have been talking about the immediate moment of disrespect. What to think, what to feel, what to say, what not to say. But the Stoics understood, with the patient strategic clarity of men who had been around long enough to know that most battles are won before they are fought. True self-respect is not a moment-to-moment discipline. It is a long-term strategy. And the most powerful move in that long-term strategy is one that most people never even consider. In the ancient Greek world, one of the most severe punishments that could be administered to another citizen was not physical. It was social. They called it atia, dishonor. You were not harmed. You were not imprisoned. You were simply excluded, removed from the warmth of human community. Your presence was no longer acknowledged. Your voice no longer carried. The ancient Greeks understood, 2,500 years ago, what the modern world is only beginning to recover the vocabulary to name. Access to your presence, your attention, your energy, your warmth, your humor, your time is the most valuable currency you will ever possess. And like any currency, it must be managed with absolute precision. You do not need to punish people who disrespect you. You simply need to price them out. Most people, when confronted with chronic disrespect, respond with one of two extremes, both of which carry enormous hidden costs. They explode. They deliver dramatic ultimatums. They hold emotional confrontations that give the other person more narrative power over their life than the other person has earned the right to hold. Or they silently endure. They continue offering full access to their energy and their warmth, while internally, quietly, slowly, irreversibly deteriorating. The Stoic third path is neither of these. It is the quiet, methodical, deliberate withdrawal of light. No announcement, no drama, no speech, no confrontation. Over time, simply reduce the aperture. Shorter responses. Less personal information volunteered. Less warmth in your tone when warmth is no longer being met with matching investment. Less of your genuine presence in shared spaces. You become, as the Stoics would have said, a gray rock. Not hostile. Hostile can be named and confronted and used against you. Not cold in a way that can be described to a third party and used as evidence of your own toxicity. Simply less. Less available. Less accessible. Less nourishing. There is someone in your life, perhaps a long-term friend, perhaps a family member, perhaps a colleague with enough seniority to make the structure awkward. They have a pattern. Every time you share good news, they find the shadow in it. Every time you are vulnerable, they file it away and use it later, in a moment designed to demonstrate, to a room, that they know something about you the room does not. Every time you succeed, they quietly diminish it. You have excused it. You have explained it to yourself. You have decided, generously, repeatedly, that they do not mean it that way. But the pattern has continued for years, and each time it happens, a small piece of your trust, your genuine self, retreats slightly further from their reach. The Stoic response is to honor that retreat rather than fight it. Your soul already knows who is safe to be around. The chronic underminer has already been assessed by the most honest part of you. The task is simply to allow your behavior to align with what you already deep inside know. Pull back the investment slowly, quietly, without malice, and reallocate that energy to relationships where it is genuinely received. This is not revenge. This is resource management. Your attention, your time, your emotional energy. These are finite. They must be stewarded with the same intelligence you would apply to any scarce and precious resource that you have only ever been given a limited quantity of. People who respect you will have access to all of it. People who repeatedly demonstrate contempt will find, quietly and without drama, that the supply has quietly dried up. And when they notice, and they always notice, you will not need to say a word. The message will already have been received. Lesson 9. Summits are quieter from the top than they look from the bottom. This is the lesson most people are not ready for. Not because it is complicated. Philosophically, it is because it requires you to become bigger than everything that has ever hurt you. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again across the same private journals to one of the most radical ideas in the entire recorded history of Western philosophy. An idea that even most Stoic scholars do not fully emphasize, because giving the idea its actual weight would have required them to do the work they have been writing about instead of writing about the work. He wrote, "It is peculiar to man to love even those who do wrong. And this happens if only you reflect that they are your brothers, and that they act through ignorance and unwillingly." Marcus Aurelius, a man who had been lied to by senators for decades, a man who had watched betrayals arrive from inside his own circle, a man who had been manipulated by political rivals his entire adult life, was writing about loving them. Not as weakness, not as doormat spirituality, not as a performance of virtue for an audience, as a deliberate strategic choice to refuse the corruption that hatred was offering him. Hatred is not a weapon you aim at another person. It is a poison you drink yourself. When you carry active, sustained, daily hatred for someone who has disrespected you, they live in your mind rent-free. You rehearse arguments with them in the shower. You craft the perfect takedown at 2 in the morning, with the particular intensity of a person who has not yet realized the takedown will never, in fact, be used. You begin to filter your decisions through the lens of what would hurt them most. And while you are doing all of this, they are sleeping. They are living their life. They have moved on to their next victim. They have left you holding the burning residue of an interaction they will never remember with the same vividness you are still carrying it. Every moment of genuine hatred you carry is a moment you have subtracted from your own life to enrich theirs. The profound betrayal. The deep, structural one. Someone you loved, not just liked, but genuinely loved. In a way that you can describe to yourself without having to qualify it, betrayed you in a way that rearranged your understanding of who you actually were. It cost you years of rebuilding. The idea of extending anything resembling warmth, never mind love, in the direction of this person feels physically repulsive. Your body tightens just considering it. Here is what Marcus would say to you in this moment. You are not extending warmth to them. You are extending warmth to yourself. The moment you genuinely release, not excuse, not forget, not pretend did not happen, but release the need to maintain active resentment, you recover the enormous psychic energy that was being spent day after day on the maintenance of that wound. You do not have to like them. You do not have to be near them. You do not have to trust them ever again. Wisdom demands none of those things. The Stoic resolution is not forgiveness as most people understand it. It is something considerably more precise. It is the recognition that the person who hurt you was, in the specific moment, they hurt you, acting from the deepest poverty of their own nature. They could not, at that moment, have done otherwise than they did. Not because you are excusing it. You are not. You see it clearly. But because you understand that character is destiny, and their character produced exactly the outcome it was always going to produce. You see them clearly, without illusion, without hatred, and you step out of the story they are living and back into your own. That is the summit. That is where Marcus Aurelius actually lived, for the entire adult portion of his life, and it is available to you. Lesson 10. The life so full there is no room left for the wound. Every lesson in this video, up to this point, has been about defending something, protecting your peace, guarding your energy, holding your dignity, building walls around the citadel. And all of that was necessary. Without it, you would have been defenseless against the version of the world that was busy engineering your emotional collapse. But we are ending somewhere different. We are ending where Marcus Aurelius himself always, in the end, returned, not to the battlefield, to the purpose. Because the ultimate answer to disrespect is not a better defense. It is a life so consumed by meaning that there is simply no room left for the wound. In 167 AD, while Marcus Aurelius was fighting the Marcomannic Wars on the northern frontier of an empire that was actively hemorrhaging territory, while simultaneously managing a plague that was killing thousands, a corrupt and restless Senate, an active military rebellion in the eastern provinces, and the personal, cumulative grief of losing several of his own children, he wrote in the same private journal we have been quoting throughout, "Confine yourself to the present." 2,000 years later, that is still the most radical productivity system ever written. Not manage your time. Not optimize your workflow. Not deal with the disrespect later, when you have more energy. Confine yourself to the present, to what is in front of you, to the work that your highest self is called to do right now. A person fully consumed by their purpose has no psychological vacancy for the opinions of their critics. The space simply is not there. The bandwidth has been allocated deliberately elsewhere. Think about the greatest creators, builders, warriors, and philosophers in recorded history. The ones who actually changed something. Were they free of critics? Not at all. Socrates was executed by his critics. Galileo was imprisoned by his. Lincoln was despised and publicly mocked by half the nation he was trying, despite being despised, to save. What made them untouchable was not that they learned to handle the criticism better. It was that the work, the mission, the purpose, the thing they were actually built to do was simply bigger than the noise. The criticism could not compete for mental space with the purpose, because the purpose had already occupied everything. Picture the version of you that exists 5 years from now. If you have actually committed to everything in this video, if you have built the inner citadel, you understand the origin of disrespect. You have mastered the pause, the mirror question, the silence. You have withdrawn your energy from environments that did not value it. You have released the active resentment. You have built the iron garden of your genuine, unperformative self-worth from the inside, where nothing outside can reach the foundation. Now picture that version of you walking into any room. When someone makes a cutting remark, you hear it the way a mountain hears wind. You register it. You note what it tells you about the person making it. And you continue unmoved. Not because you have trained yourself into emotional numbness. Please do not mistake this for numbness. Numbness is a different and considerably more expensive achievement than this. But because the wind does not matter to the mountain. The mountain has deeper business. You have deeper business. Your purpose, whatever it is. However clearly or however unclearly you can currently see it through the fog of the life you have been living, is the final and most complete answer to disrespect. Because purpose creates gravity. It pulls you forward even when every social force is trying to hold you back. It gives you a reason to get up from the wreckage that is more powerful than any wound. The Stoics did not merely teach philosophy. They lived it in the most brutal, high-stakes arenas of human experience. And the common thread across every one of them, the emperor, the slave, the statesman, the soldier, was this: they knew what they were for, and nothing could redirect them from it. Find what you are for, pursue it with everything you have, and watch how quickly the people who spent decades trying to reduce you become irrelevant, not through any action of yours, but simply because you have moved so far beyond the reach of their smallness that they cannot, at this point, even see you. That is sovereignty. That is the Stoic life. And it has been waiting for you the entire time. The return to your life. You stayed. Most people do not. Most people clicked away in the first 2 minutes, looking for a shortcut, a hack, a 30-second fix for a wound that took years to cut that deep. But you stayed. And that tells me something important about who you are. You are not looking for a trick. You are looking for a transformation. And transformation, real transformation. The kind that permanently rewires how you move through the world. The kind that your friends and your colleagues and the people across the dinner table will notice within a single quarter is exactly what you have begun today. Not completed. Begun. These 10 lessons are not a one-time viewing. They are a practice. They are a philosophy. They are a way of being that you will have to choose again, in real time, in the moments when the next choice costs you something. The moment in the meeting room when the manager makes the belittling comment and the entire table is waiting for your response. The moment at the dinner table when the relative reaches for the same line they have used for 20 years. The moment in the negotiation when your opponent tries the destabilization opener and your body knows, before your mind has to reach for it, exactly which silence you are going to use. The moment in the aftermath of betrayal when the wound is still hot and the hatred is offering itself, very politely, as a free service. The 2:00 a.m. Silence when the wound still burns and the room you live in still feels unfamiliar. In every one of those moments, you now have something you did not have before you pressed play. A framework, a language, a practice. And the knowledge that the greatest, most battle-tested minds in human history chose this path and became, by every available historical measure, untouchable. Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus, Seneca, Cato, Diogenes, they are not legends because they were never hurt. They are legends because they refused with the entire disciplined lifetime they had been given to be defined by it. Now it is your turn. Go build your citadel. Go plant your iron garden. Go confine yourself to the present, to the purpose, to the work that only you were actually built to do. And the next time someone tries to dismantle your peace, let them try. Let them. Let them exhaust themselves against walls they cannot see. You will already be gone. Already building. Already free. I will see you in the next one. Stay sovereign.